Hello, everyone. Trusting everybody's doing well. Today we have a student panel from our college, Northwest Vista College. And on our student panel today are three students who are all second-year students at our college. I shall first introduce Valencia Warner. She is the president of the Black Students Union. Her professional path is environmental science. Our next student panel member is Arezi Okulu, and he is the vice president of the Black Students Union. His professional path is music. Our third student member on our student panel today is Chance Moreno, and Chance is our politician. His journey is political science. We have also with us faculty and staff. We have Mrs. Mallory Plummer, who is with Student Success, and she has been also an instructor. We also have Ms. Valerie White, and Ms. Valerie White is a member of the Alamo College's district, and she also has been a faculty instructor. And we have Mr. Daniel Johnson. We all know Daniel, and he is the advisor for the Black Students Union. So now we're ready to start this amazing panel of amazing students. Mrs. Plummer is our first moderator.
Thank you so much, Dr. Brenya. Welcome, BSU panel. I will be asking the first question. How has the Black Lives Matter movement impacted you?
Well, thank you, Mrs. Plummer, for that question. I wanted to start with what the Black Lives Matter movement really started with. And it's not that it's only Black Lives Matter only on this earth, but that Black Lives Matter too. And so it's really about getting people to understand that white supremacy, systematic racism, structural racism, institutional racism has always belittled the importance of Black lives. And with this movement and what I see out of this movement, that it's about recognizing the value, the voices, the victories of Black lives, and trying to get people to understand that we need to be treated with respect too. It doesn't matter of our skin color. We can still be granted the same opportunities and be given the same type of awards that someone else would be given if they weren't Black. And with Black Lives Matter movement, it's about letting our voices always be heard instead of always silenced.
Me personally, the Black Lives Matter movement has been bittersweet, at least specifically for me. With the social awareness that's happened because of the Black Lives Matter movement, I noticed a lot of people have hopped on and proclaimed that Black Lives Matter through like Instagram bios or just different bios and handles and things such as in that nature. But me personally, I think that it could be a good and a bad thing, because honestly, I felt like though people understand that, it's going to take a while until structural change start happening. I think that there needs to be more conversations had about, okay, like what are these environments that's fostering these type of problems? Like, why is it that these specific communities which are facing hyper policing, why is it that their interactions with police end up turning fatal? And I think when questions like this become asked, and there's dialogue around this, and we also have policy that follows this, I think that would be really, really important. But overall, it seems personally like it's been a whole bunch of, I guess you could say, social hype, right? Like on social media and TV and media and just in general. And I think that I just hope that the Black Lives Matter movement, like what it originally was, because I do remember in 2013 or 14 when Ferguson was happening, I think I was in middle school, or yeah, I think it was Baltimore when I was in middle school, and I remember I was really gun-ho about this. And this was before Black Lives Matter became like a thing, right? An international thing, because I think with the passing of George Floyd, or the murder of George Floyd, I think that it became an international thing, and it really opened more than people in America's eyes to like the structural problems that America has. And I think that now I think it's done more good than it has bad. I would say like the Black Lives Matter movement, in personally with me. But other than that, that's kind of my take on it. It's impacted my life extremely because I am a Black male in America, and I do, regardless of whether I like it or not, people are going to look at me as that first and foremost before anything else. And I think that it has helped me realize at least that we do have problems within this country and figure out or pontificate ways that we could solve them.
For me, the Black Lives Matter movement is about recognizing that white supremacy and a number of other factors still very much vitiate all aspects of Black life and all aspects of a lot of people's life. It's about recognizing, for example, in Boston, the average white family's net wealth is $40,000, whereas the average Black family's net wealth is $8. Eight, like single digits. And so it's looking at a disparity of that nature and realizing that that can't be accounted for by Black people simply not working hard enough, or simply making poor decisions, or simply not advocating for themselves. You have to look at a 5,000 to 1 disparity and recognize that there is some social inequities that are the result of that. And incidentally, if you look into the numbers, on almost every single quality of life indicator, it happens that Black people are worse off than their non-Black counterparts. That is life expectancy, likelihood of dying in childbirth, literacy rates, et cetera, et cetera. And so it's looking at that and recognizing that those inequities are the result of systems, and then asking ourselves, how do we change those systems? And what do we do to change those kind of inequities? And this means, I think this is very important, as Fred Hampton said, we're not going to fight racism with racism. We're going to fight racism with solidarity. So it doesn't mean bringing everyone down to the level of Black people. It means bringing Black people up. It means, community self-empowerment, doing mutual aid, trying to, simply show solidarity. That's what the Black Lives Matter movement means to me. And I think that's maybe its most important component. It's simply telling people, putting the idea in their head that a better world is possible, and that we need to go about making it so.
Thank you, students, and thank you, Mrs. Mallory Plummer, for moderating our first question for our college. Our second moderator is Ms. Valerie White, and she will be moderating this section of our student panel.
Thank you, students, for having your voices heard and for participating and for your insight. It's invaluable. My question for you is, have you personally participated in any of the local protests in any way?
Thank you, Ms. White, for that question. For me, I have not participated in any protests because I know when they started up, it was really around the time that COVID was like at an all-time high for Texas specifically. And with some of my family members, they have some health issues that I didn't want to put at risk. So I didn't get out and actually do any protests, but I did sign some petitions and try to donate to some organizations or charities along that, so that I can actually do something that will help make a good impact on Black lives. And currently now I'm trying to get a petition going to, that is for chapter 143 and 174 to help fix like the San Antonio's police department and get them to start holding accountability for things that they do wrong that maybe they don't get held accountable for, that would be impacting Black lives. And that's kind of like the background of why all of these protests have been happening around the country, is through police brutality that has kind of been excused and not quite paid attention to. And police have been able to just kind of pass by and keep doing these wrongdoings onto Black lives. So that's kind of my effort, is through petitions rather than through protests.
Me personally, I've been fortunate enough to be able to attend these protests and actually be on the ground with it. I would say that it gives me a different type of insight with just how much people are mourning and how much this means to people. I think that it's easy to watch this from your phone or from the comfort of your home and just, draw any type of judgment. But when you're actually on the ground and you're starting to realize like this story, and when I say this story, unfortunately, it's become narrativized that, a Black man being shot and killed by the police is one of those like, oh, another one. Like, it's not nothing that's shocking. It loses its value now. And I think that it made me really realize that a lot of people have this pain, and because the families lose, husbands, brothers, and it means a lot to a lot of people. And I think that it really changed my perspective. I think especially because of how it was, it's been stigmatized, right? Protesting, right? So I think it's very, very interesting. People want to paint protesting in a specific light that gets negative and people are looting most of the time. And I think that that's just completely untrue for most of the parts, at least where in San Antonio when I went in protests. I think that there is a lot of people are angry and rightfully so. I think that we do have a problem with police brutality within America, and anyone that says that it's not that the contrary, I think that they're not being honest with themselves and they haven't spent the time to like delve into it and really look, because the amount of evidence that points to like, for example, the Breonna Taylor case, and before that, the Ahmaud Arbery case, like these are just like blatant, like it's so obvious. Like it's one of those things where it gets me kind of riled up because I feel like it doesn't affect a lot of people, so a lot of people don't really have it's easy for you to turn a blind eye to something when it doesn't affect you. But I remember being like personally in middle school, like I had a friend, his older brother was killed by police, and like I remember he always had a feeling towards police, but I've never and I just thought that was like sometimes those type of things happen. But as I got older, I started to realize like this is a problem and this is an issue. I think that there needs to be more conversations, and when I say conversations, I mean like real, like have the family members, have people who are really affected by this speak to these politicians, because I feel like it's easy for the politicians to detach themselves. I saw this video not too long ago of this one woman, and she confronted a politician, I think, that put her brother or did something about her brother's case. Her brother passed away. And I think that those type of real conversations will do more good, because I think it's really easy for policymakers, right, to detach themselves, because a lot of times they're not on the ground, they're not really seeing what's really going on, and they're not faced with the consequences of their actions, specifically in policy, right? And I think that America is a great nation, but it could be better. It could definitely be better, and we have a lot of room for improvement. And and that's a big part of it, which is recognizing that there is a problem with police brutality, recognizing that people are losing their lives, and also action. Like you might not agree with everything people say about on the context of police brutality, but for you to at least recognize that there is an issue, that's why this is coming up, is a different thing. But that's my point of view, and that's what I got out of protesting.
So for me, I'm in the same boat as Valencia in this case, namely that I had to weigh the risk of infecting myself and possibly other members of my family versus, what the protest meant to me. But at the same time, I try to show financial support. For example, I gave a number of supplies to protesters who were out. I delivered some water and some snacks and some sunscreen, which incidentally people often forget. Don't forget sunscreen. But in any case, I try to show financial support in that way and do some sort of mutual aid, because I think it's a very important and necessary social movement. But at the same time, I think we need to recognize why these movements are taking place to begin with. Amnesty International released a report a couple of months ago entitled "The World is Watching: Mass Violation of Protesters' Rights in the United States," and they talk about that. And one of the things that they mention is that actually in the United States, there's not a single state which complies with international law, insofar as international law requires that police officers exhaust all other methods before they resort to the use of lethal force. In the United States, not a single state has that requirement. Moreover, the United States does not have an emphasis on de-escalation, and we put a lot of emphasis on punitive measures of justice and on measures of punishment rather than on measures of rehabilitation, and that's reflected in the statistics. Every year, 1,000 people are killed by the police in the United States, which is only comparable to countries where they have military dictatorships, and so it's kind of hard to appreciate just how high that number is. When in a country like Japan, it's like 2. So we have to look at that and recognize that it's quite a big problem. And one that, of course, we're trying to address, and that I think is necessarily outside of the realm of electoral organizing. It needs to be the case that we put pressure on people and that we disrupt and agitate so that these things can be changed. But yes, that's my experience with the protest movement and how I participated.
Thank you all for answering that question. I have a follow-on for Arizi, but any of you can chime in. But specifically, because you're the one who said I did go out and engage in the protests. And my question is, what was the driving force that allowed you to push past fear of having some type of retaliation against yourself as a young Black male? I'm a mother of 2 Black young men, and one of them went out there and I feared for him. So what forced you to push past that? And for the other 2, you may not have gone on the front lines, but you engaged in some way. So to push past any fears to engage in the movement. So starting with Arizi, thank you.
Thank you for that question. I think it was one of those things. My mom, it was just, the opportunity was just too good to pass up. I think my mom was at work. I told her that we were going to a park. It was a lie of a mission, but let alone it was still a lie. I lied. But what made me push past the fear? I was with my brother, and me and my brother, it's been one of those, like, my brother's also a poli-sci major, or he just got his bachelor's in poli-sci, and he wants to be a lawyer. And it's always been, I was also involved in debate with Chance, and we've been having conversations about structural violence and things of this nature before it became, before 2020, before George Floyd's death. And it's always been a lot of conversations. I think that that moment where it became like I have an opportunity to finally do something, I had to jump on it. I couldn't think about what if this may happen. There was people outside with AR-15s. There were people, like, I saw my middle school football coach. He had a shotgun. Like, it was crazy. People were outside. Like, people were outside. People had guns. Things could have happened, right? They were shooting rubber bullets. People were running. Things happened, right? And I think that it was just like, well, I mean, we live in a world where a lot of people do a lot of social media activism, and that's cool, but it can mean it could be good and bad, because there's a lot of things going on. I think for you to be able to see it for yourself and develop your own perspective, nothing beats that. Like, as much as you could feel outraged from your phone, but when you're on the ground, it gives you a different perspective about what's really, really going on. And I think that it was one of those things where I was like, I don't think I'd be happy with myself or be able to live with myself if I passed up that opportunity and kind of, put my money where my mouth is and go out there and see what's going on. I think that I was afraid. I'm not gonna lie. Like, there was times where I was just like, okay, this is about to get like wild, because they did start shooting rubber bullets and people started running and people were getting trampled over. And there were people that were bleeding. There was things happening. There was things happening, right? And but it gave me a different perspective on police, because I did have a conversation with an officer there, and it was heated. It was a heated exchange, but most of the time I noticed that a lot of the times these officers weren't necessarily trying to have that type of conversation, right? It was one of those things where they were filling a role, and their job was to just be there and not necessarily engage, but only respond with like heightened force. Like if something was to happen, they would take it all the way there, right? And I remember asking this, it was specifically a Black officer, and I was like, how do you feel about what's going on? He was like, you should speak to your politicians about it. I'm like, okay, you have kids, don't you? And he's like, yeah. And I'm like, so God forbid, but if let's say one of these things were to happen to your children, how would you feel about it? He was like, you should speak to your politicians about it. I spoke to another officer, and this officer admitted to me that he didn't even graduate high school. I think that one thing that I can say that most when I had conversations with these officers is that there's a severe lack of training, right? And a severe lack of because being a police officer, you have other people, you're responsible for the lives of other people, right? I don't think that should be given to like the criteria for what it takes to become a police officer, the training and just what it definitely needs to be increased. Like, and I think that that's one thing I got out of the protest, and it's something that I learned. And because it's good when you read all these articles about it, but when you actually speak to the police officer and you really start to realize, like, dang, these dudes kind of uneducated, dang, these dudes kind of like impulsive, like why are they police officers again? It gives you a different perspective. So I mean, there's still protests happening, and there's still ways that people could get involved, and I would urge everyone, and you don't have to necessarily agree with everything I say, but if you can go out there and see for yourself and develop your own perspective and have a conversation with people first and foremost, it'll be the best thing to happen. That's all I have to say.
Oh, I'd like to briefly comment on that. I think the fear that Irize voiced is very much well-founded. In the aforementioned study by Amnesty International, they found that the first level of police response to protests, which of course not only are not illegal, but which are constitutionally protected and even advocated for by the founders of the government. You know, for example, if you read the Black Panther Party for Self-Defense, which is the original name, if you read their charter, what you find is that they quote the Declaration of Independence, where they say that if there's an unjust government, a tyrannical government, not only do people have the right to overthrow it, but they have a moral obligation to overthrow the government and to establish one that is in concert with human rights. And needless to say, the police response to a number of these protests has been incommensurate with that. It has been riot gear as a first level of response. It has been tear gas and rubber bullets as a first level of response. And so, yeah, this fear is very much warranted. But at the same time, we have to recognize that this work is important, and that there have been many, many people who have not only risked their lives, but who have lost their lives, who, you know, organizing for this type of work, and that many of the negative outcomes that we see at these protests are the result of how we say, is the tip of the iceberg, so to speak. You know, it's kind of the catalyst of years, centuries even worth of oppression. You know, which is kind of culminating. I think the reason that the George Floyd situation was so prominent is because that it was so unambiguously horrific. It was so obviously moral. I mean, you know, immoral and wrong. You know, and there's, you know, in other such cases, you know, you could possibly make an argument, right, in defense of whoever the officer in question. But here, you know, it's, you know, nearly impossible. And so that was one such element. But again, it's, you know, racism is not always that blatant, you know, it operates in much more subtle and insidious forms. And I think, you know, it's been the work of organizers and of organizations like Black Lives Matter to point that out. You know, as they say, this country is much more likely to poison your water than it is to shoot you. You know, and so we need to recognize that. You know, and even though 1,000 people die every year because of, you know, as a result of police violence, you know, 35,000 people die every year because they don't have health insurance, you know, or because they can't see a doctor or whatever it happens to be, you know. And so it's about recognizing those things, you know, and trying to bring it about. One more thing, and I don't want to go on too long, but the another conundrum that we're faced with is that the job of American police officers is not possible. They're in the first instance asked to enforce the law, and promote public safety, but that's only actually about 5% of their occupational time. The other 95% is answering, calls about people with mental health disorders, or answering calls about homeless people, or answering calls about people who are addicted to drugs. And the reason that is the case is because so many of the social systems of the United States are inadequate in dealing with these problems, and are, and as a result, the only mechanism of response we have is the police. And as Riza indicated, they're not equipped to handle none of these issues. And so that leads to very bad outcomes. Something like over 30% of all the people, of incarcerated people, are have mental health issues. And so that's quite a big problem. And so I think our response should not be punitive and carceral in nature, but should be trying to help people.
Thank you. Thank you all for your questions. I truly appreciate you.
Thank you, moderators. So we are on our last part of this wonderful panel, and I shall be the moderator for this last question. So thank you, each of us students. My background is criminal law, criminal justice, and psychology. So my question for you, starting with Alencia, is how do you think our college, Northwest Vista, can serve its Black students better?
Okay, so I want to really add on to the question by saying what Black Student Union's intentions are. That way the staff and faculty can get an understanding of what we would expect out of them and what we would expect out of other students. And that is that Black Student Union's intentions are to improve the quality of life for African Americans and other minorities through educational and social opportunities being brought by us doing these meetings, by us getting out into our communities and figuring out like what can we do activity-wise to make change. And so, meanwhile, we're also trying to promote academic excellence and always educating people on Black history and Black events today and anything revolving around Black matters, but also we're trying to bring around cultural awareness and getting people to realize that social unity, that matters the most. And it can't just be us few board members making all of these changes, but other people, and not just Black people making these changes, but Latinos, white people even. A lot of the issues that Black people face in America started out with white people. So we need white people to actually help us drive out all of these changes, because we can't do it alone. It's always been for years and years that Black people have been about going, oh, we matter, or listen to us, understand us, like we're just as important. We've been trying to call to people to focus on us and give us respect, but we can't just keep doing that. We have to have other people realize that we're still calling, and for them to step forward and do something. And the students, while our voices are very important as a younger generation, and we drive out the years to follow, like what happens to our country, it also matters on the people older than us and the people who are in head of the government, who help run our communities, to get out to with us and help educate people on anything revolving around, Black issues and acknowledgements, our voices and our struggles. So that's what I would need, and what the rest of Black Student Union would need out of the college, specifically staff and faculty. I know that with last year, well, at least our first year of Black Student Union, for all of us, Arize and then Chance to Say and other board members, we've had some issues with getting people to realize, one, that Black Student Union is a thing, and that what we're doing is to help bring a better community for Bexar County and for other states. And some people saw it as, well, is it a group that just shows that only Black people matter and no one else matters? No, that wasn't the case, but we still got a lot of that out of even some staff members who didn't understand what Black Student Union was about. And that's one thing, is just getting people to understand our purpose, our motives, and our goals. And last year, Black Student Union didn't take off as I intended or as Arize intended and other board members intended, because we had that kind of barrier with people not understanding our purpose and what we wanted to get out of the union. But hopefully with this year, and then with this panel that we have today, that people can realize like what needs to be changed and implemented at our college for improvements to be seen.
Thank you, Arize. Yeah, you mentioned Baltimore. In 1980s, for 4 years, I was a Black Student Union member at Johns Hopkins University. So that I'm looking forward to you expressing what our college, Northwest Vista College, can do to help their Black students.
I think it's actually a laundry list of things. I think first is education, right? So it all goes down to education. Like how we speak about Blackness within the academia is so important, right? So Blackness is always taught specifically around the context of slavery, right? In relation to America, right? And I think that this sort of like subservient like narrative in a way of Black people is actually doing way more damage than it is helping, right? Because I think that the history of Black people, right, is an extensive one, right, and it's a history that also impacts our culture vastly, right. So I think that one thing that Northwest Vista can do is also have classes that explore the history of Black people and past slavery, before slavery, pre-slavery, and I think that that's really, really important. Another thing is that it kind of and this is just touching off what Alencia said, like all the backlash we faced, and I wouldn't call it necessarily backlash, but I felt like we weren't necessarily taken serious, especially when we started up, because a lot of people had their own ideas about what Black Student Union represented, and that wasn't good. And it was really discouraging and sad that it took for George Floyd and Ahmaud Arbery and all these protests to happen for people to be like, oh, now they want us to speak about it. And now people care about Black Student Union. One is just like, I feel like, especially in America, it takes for Black people that like Black death is like currency in America for attention. Like Black people have to die for things to change. It can't be one of those things where people are preemptive. Like, okay, maybe there are problems. Let's. It has to be something major and tragic has to happen for people to be like, okay, there's a problem. Let's put these people in a position where they could do things. Because I know that there was nights and many conversations me and Alencia had about like how could we really make this experience good for Black students at the Alamo colleges. Like what could we do? These events, these things that were happening around, we felt that a lot of it fell at least like it wasn't taken as serious, and and it's understood, but I think that NVC could do a lot with also just multicultural education, because we do understand we live in the city of San Antonio, right? It's predominantly Hispanic, and we do understand that NVC is also historically a Hispanic institution. But at the same time, there are other groups, and I think that's not only just Black history that should be taught extensively, but also Asian history and Native American history, things so we could all have a way more objective point of view of our agency as not only Black people, but as minorities. Like we're not just like in relation to America, right? We understand we're living in America, right? But it's just like, I'm Nigerian, right? I know the tribes I'm from, right? But a lot of people might not understand that things, there's more to what we're being shown in the schools, right? A lot of Black people just feel like, well, we've been told our whole lives that our ancestors were, slaves, and it's almost a demoralizing thing. Like, but I think that there's way more history, like Mansa Musa. I know I had to be in my world history AP class, I think my sophomore year, before I heard about who Mansa Musa was, right? And by that time, I already had my own ideas, and and these were not always overt things, but I had my own assumptions about my own position as a Black person. I had and I think that it was very empowering to see, like, dang, like there's people, like there were Black people doing things in history, and there were Black people that made changes that's also impacted us extremely before slavery, and there were Black people who held positions of power and high status. So I think that it's very, very, very important that that's instituted, whether it be an African American studies or just the African studies, or a world or a history class that is really extensive, right, and also all encapsulating, right? And that's my point of view.
Yeah, and then to tag along with what Arize was saying, I remember for my first year Northwest Vista, the first thing that I was really focused on was either an African American studies class or just African studies, one of those. And the two of them are quite different, because what was going on in Africa along with what's going on here didn't always connect. And I wanted to at least be able to take two of those type of classes, and Northwest Vista didn't have any of those, and they still don't have any of those. And I feel like if we had those courses at this college, it would make it easier for people to understand, like, why we even have a Black Lives Matter movement going on, or why we have a Black Student Union present at our college today.
Beautiful. Before we go to Chance, I think you deserve to know that we're working on that in the background. And we totally agree with you. So Chance?
I agree with Arize that the number of things that Northwest Vista could do is long, but again, that's for any institution is they have a lot of catching up to do. But first and foremost, I think Arize makes a good point that the history of Black people does not start or end with slavery, although that is how it has been narrativized and told in the United States, and that in our organizing and in our demand making, we don't mean to paint Black people as victims. We mean to paint Black people as agents, as people who, like all other people, simply need resources, simply need access to a number of things in order that they can affect social change. I'm a big believer in the principle of if you give a man a fish, you feed him for a day, and if you teach him how to fish, you feed him for a lifetime. It's about community self-empowerment. It's about being able to go out and make it so that Black people are self-sufficient, and that they can rely on their own community, or that they can rely on the people around them, the things that they might need. As for Northwest Vista, I think what would be helpful is a Black History X, as it were, that is presenting Black historical figures, which may not get as much play in history classes as we would like, for a number of reasons. I think one of those reasons is that because the ideas that they represent they endanger the core of the United States. That is, Fred Hampton, when he was organizing in Chicago, organizing free breakfast programs, organizing health clinics, things of that nature, the principal sin of that organizing work was putting the idea in people's head that a better world is possible. People can't believe that. It's very important that people don't believe that, that they believe, well, you just have to go to school hungry, and you can't have access to adequate medical care. This is just how the world is. You can't advocate for a better future for yourself. And so I think what the Black Panther Party was doing, and what a number of other organizations were doing, was saying, no, this is not the case. A better world is in fact possible. And they were teaching people how to make it. How to build a better world. Through grassroots organizing. Now, incidentally, those efforts were stifled, but it wasn't in the battle of ideas. Quite the opposite. Fred Hampton was just assassinated by the Chicago Police Department. And so, of course, that's another critical work of this, another sort of dimension of this, right? That this is very dangerous work, which people have dedicated their lives to. But I think that would be one very helpful aspect, right? That what this Vista could put on, a crash course in organizing and what does it mean to build organizations and to build social movements, you know, which are outside of the realm of electoral politics, but which nonetheless seek to help people and improve people's lives. One more thing I think is worth mentioning.
Action.
If Northwest Vista could simply let people know about existing organizations and groups that already exist, right, that are dedicated to the struggle, rather than trying to either create their own or rather than trying to, you know, direct students' creative energies any which way. You know, just say, here's what exists now. You know, direct you toward this goal, and you know, do that which you will. I think that would be helpful.
Thank you, Chance. Thank you, Lencia and Arizi. The here in the United States, based on our academic scholarship, what we teach and know is that we don't have just one dominant culture, which is often spoken of. We actually have two, because within the African American Black experience in the United States, the Black experience helped to build the US, and it is a dominant culture that has infused itself within every aspect of our nation. So thank you for bringing that up, and we're working on that in the background. And what we can say is thank you for this panel. You were awesome. We are very proud of each and every one of you. And thank you for representing our students, and more specifically, our Black students. We know that there are quite a few of our African American Black students on campus who are very proud of you, and would thank you for representing them.
Thank you so much, Dr. Brenya. This concludes this student panel. But again, we want to thank you for voicing not just your opinions, but showing all of the employees of the Alamo Colleges District and all of the students within all of the campuses that you all are brilliant. You all are change agents. And we can learn so much from listening to each and every one of you. So we want to thank you again. God bless you.